All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Chief Architect Network Live. This is a fun show that we do live that comes to you from the Chief Architect Network. That is a group of peers, and it's a number of architecture leaders, enterprise architecture leaders, architecture practice leaders. And we exist to do a couple things that you can see right here. We're here to learn from each other as peers, which is our goal today. But hopefully that's going to help us widen our perspective, share best practices with each other, grow as leaders, develop our talent, and drive outcomes. So that's what the network is all about, and we'll tell you more about it at the end of the show. But we are excited to be here again today. I'm your host, Brian Chambers. I'm the Chief Architect at Chick-fil-A. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Eckert. Grant, how are you, man?
I'm good. I'm a chief architect by trade as well, a graduate from Danaher, Walgreens Boots Alliance, Medtronic, and I helped to build the architecture practice at Lowe's. And currently I'm back at Walgreens having a ton of fun supporting their architecture practice. So it's a small world and we keep bumping into each other in it. I love it.
That's awesome. Well, they're lucky to have you and glad to have you here today. So we're going to get into our show here in just a second. One thing to remember for those who are out in the audience is that this is indeed a live event. And that's pretty cool because it means you have the opportunity to actually make comments, ask questions. And if you've watched these before, you'll see that you've seen that we bring those in at the appropriate times. And if you have questions, we'll try and answer them as quickly as possible, but definitely get to them before the end of the show. So be active in those comments and we'll make sure to include you. So with that, let me hand it over to Grant and he's going to introduce our special guest for today's episode.
So it's a huge honor of mine to have a friend of mine that I've known for years. He's been a mentor, he's been a colleague, he's been an advisor. His name's Patrick Mons. He led the data practice and the architecture teams within that at Medtronic, and we partnered together a number of years, ran a large conference for our CIO together, and have stayed friends and stayed together ever since. He's out of the Netherlands. Today, he is the head of data and AI at Philips. And let me just bring him onto the stage so he can introduce himself. It's just awesome to have him here with us. So I'll click around and move us around a little bit so we're all together. Patrick, so great to have you, man.
Welcome.
Just for the audience, maybe share a little bit about yourself.
Good afternoon. Good to see you again. It was fun when you said you keep on bumping into each other. Indeed, keep on bumping into you, Grant. And Brian, nice to meet you. So hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you dial in on the world. It's a privilege to be here with the group. So as Grant said, Patrick, I'm Dutch, based in the Netherlands. My background, I about 30 years ago, I was educated as a software developer. That's where I started my career at Medtronic. Medtronic, a beautiful company where I stayed for 26 years. But then, got a bit itchy, like, okay, do I want to, see something else in the rest of my life? So I decided to move on to Philips. So currently, I'm responsible for data and AI at the innovation and strategy team for Philips. So with that, we serve all the businesses. What is Philips? What are those businesses? So erase what you think to know about Philips, because many people have them in the living room in terms of television or stereos, or you use their shavers or all of that. Yes, they still longer Philips. So Philips is now 100% healthcare. And if we just look at the portfolio that we have, yes, there's still a little part in personal health that comes in with consumers. And then you can think about, the breastfeeders, the toothbrushes, shavers are still part of that indeed. But that's all like, hey, if you take good care of yourself, that will also have implications for the rest of your health. There are correlations between healthy teeth and cardiac diseases and so on there. So with that first segment, we can already get quite some indications. Then you didn't take that good care of yourself and you end up in the hospital and you need an examination and typically you end up in our precision diagnostic suites. So you get an MR, you get a CT, any of those kind of examinations, that's Philips as well. Then if you get surgery, that's where you get in the image-guided therapy space. So that's where we have live outside-in view of the bodies, so we can do low-invasive surgeries. So what does it mean? Instead of opening up your chest to do a heart surgery, you just go low-invasive with a wire through one of your veins, and the physician can see outside in exactly what he or she is doing. And then after you have been treated, you end up with the last segment, which is all about monitoring the patients, monitoring in hospitals, monitoring in at homes. And of course, that was a nutshell of what we have. In all of that whole spectrum, there are so many different therapies that we all offer. But, I said the majority of that is all in the hospital, all healthcare-based, or in the United States, also in office-based labs, where you have then more easy access to care.
That's great.
It's pretty incredible, and it makes a huge difference in our lives, right? I mean, this is a company that, like several of the companies we've worked at together, really drive health outcomes and kind of bring us back to our best selves. So it's kind of cool to be a part of making a difference in that space.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. It's like when I joined Medtronic 30 years ago, that was pure coincidence. I didn't choose for healthcare. I just needed a place to do my internship. And coincidentally, I ended up with Medtronic. But then you fall in love with that healthcare, like the impact that you make. I will never forget when I joined that company, every 7 seconds, we were improving one life. When I left the company, every second we were improving 2 lives. Well, at Philips, it's the same thing. Also here, we, it's a privilege to wake up in the morning and go to work and just think about all the great things that you're doing. A few months ago, I was actually in a hospital and I was getting explanation from the cardiologist on what they all do with their equipment. And at that point, a nurse came in like, clear the cath lab, emergency comes in. Yeah, and this professor says, hey, you should stay, you should witness this here, because now you can really see what your products are doing. And for me, that was a real special moment, because they used the Philips equipment to look outside in, and they use a Medtronic stand to treat the patient. So actually, my 2 companies came together in the same procedure, and that's really awesome. If you can see, like, hey, the work that our teams are doing day in, day out, it's truly life-saving, life-improving work. So when that patient was on the table, the physician said, like, this patient is close to death. He doesn't realize yet, but he's dead. Look here at this artery. This is for 96% blocked. 20 minutes later, that same patient steps off the table himself and walks out of the cath lab without any support. That's the impact of the products that we make. So, it's sorry for the interruption on that one, but you see my passion about what we work for.
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Brian. I think you're jumping in on this one.
Yeah, no, your passion is evident, and I love it. I think it's really great to see. I wanted to dig in maybe just a little further. People saw your role, or they can see it on the screen, the head of data and AI. What does the head of data and AI at Philips wake up thinking about in the morning? Like, what are the top things on your mind?
Yeah, great question. So as many large companies, there is not just one head of data and AI. We have multiple. So if I mentioned just a few business units that we have, and all those BUs have AI capabilities. They're all trying to innovate their products, and I will step into later a bit on what we're all doing with AI. So all those different teams are seeing, like, hey, where should we invest? What should we do? Well, I'm working for a central team. So we have in Philips, I didn't see that many other companies. Normally you have the IT organization, but with Philips we have an IT organization, but we also have the innovation and strategy team. And I'm part of that innovation and strategy team. And that's where we're really focused in the clinical space. So I'm not dealing today with like, hey, what's my supply chain, or do AI on customer base, or any of that. It's really the data and AI that we need to make our products better, to get better insights in our patients, to really guide the therapy and improve the therapy. And with that, I will come in a minute to a few examples when I talk about the impact that we make on how we use that. What do you go and think about is indeed like, okay, how do we get over the hurdles that I also want to talk a bit about later in there, because this is not evident. This is trailblazing what you're doing. And if you're trailblazing in healthcare, you know that you have to deal with authorities like FDA and all the regulators there that might not have this yet all written out, like, hey, what are we going to do with AI? Is that acceptable? Yes or no? How about synthetic data? How much synthetic data are you allowed to use versus real world data in order to train your algorithms? All these kind of things are things that we're working on. But in a minute I will come up with a few examples on the work that we're doing, and then I think that gets more clear. But I think prior to that, maybe also a bit on the why.
That's exactly where I was going to ask you to go, Patrick. I mean, we start off with digital transformation in this space. And you talk so clearly about the purpose behind this work and why it matters. I mean, that just to me blends perfectly into the pressing need, not just for the company and the services, but why digital transformation for healthcare? What's so important about that?
So, I mean, one way or the other, we're all needing healthcare. It can be today, it can be tomorrow, it can be your parents. There are so many ways where we need to touch healthcare, and the healthcare system is under pressure. It's under significant pressure. We're dealing with aging population. We're dealing with a larger chronic disease burden that we're having there. Think about diabetics, think about obesity and everything that comes from there. We're dealing with reduced budgets there, and that creates staff shortages as well. There are simply not enough qualified nurses and physicians to fill the positions that we need to fill there. And then you get in this vicious circle. If you already have all these shortages, that means there's a significant burden on the staff that's already there. So another additional problem that we see happening a lot is burnouts. Burnouts in the healthcare professionals there. And that creates, again, more burden on the people who stay there. Okay, we can't just open up a can of physicians and nurses. That's impossible. And also, if we continue the way that we are using healthcare, it would mean that 1 on the 3 working population needs to work in healthcare. That's unaffordable. We can't do that. So it's the same like telephony. When that was invented, when you still have the old telephony where someone had to plug in, the plugs. It was also like, hey, if you make that connection and it's going to explode, 1 of the 3 would have to work in there. So look what happened in meantime there, with all the innovation that happened in telephony, and how we now deal with telephony. Well, the same needs to happen with healthcare. If you look at those problems that were out there and you see that we have a staff shortage there, that's where we need to see, like, how can you reduce the burden on the staff that's out there? And when you start in healthcare, you can immediately think about reaching for the moon. Hey, let's cure cancer. Let's cure this. Can we use AI to do all these kind of things there? And yes, we can. And yes, we're also looking at these kind of things. But there is something which is way more within reach, things that we can actually do today, and not instead of reaching for the moon, but we can do these things today. So a few examples you can think of. If you're a physician and you're doing a surgery like I just mentioned in that cath lab, where someone comes in with a cardiac arrest or any other issues there, the surgery by itself would take 15 to 20 minutes. But after that surgery, that physician has another administrative burden of an equivalent time of 15 to 20 minutes. Well, what if you can use AI to reduce that administrative burden? That means that physician can treat twice as many patients as what he's doing today. Today, those physicians, they didn't study to fill out tons of forms and populate all the info there. They studied to treat patients, to cure patients there. So even there, it makes their job way more attractive. Hey, come and work for us, and you actually can do what you're trained to do, rather than, come and work for us, and you have a whole administrative burden to think of. So that's one of example where you're looking like, if I look at the images, if I look at the videos that you make there, I can exactly see where I am in the body, what kind of devices did I use, what's the timestamp today. So I can already pre-populate a lot of the info in that patient file. Another example, if you're a radiologist, 70% of the images that the radiologist has to look at is nothing. So what if AI can already pre-filter these kind of things? Like, hey, here's nothing expected, but this really needs your attention there. That already significant changes the time that they need to consume on their job. Another example on where we could help. And then the last one, data at your fingertips. So you're in the cath lab. Going in the cath lab means you're scrubbing. You're scrubbing, you get your gloves on, and you have all the things that you need to do because you're sterile. Oh, now I need new information. I need to go to the office next door to get the info. I need to get my gloves off, get my info. Now I need to scrub again, get my gloves on, go in there. That's reality. And not once per procedure. It can happen multiple times per procedure. So how do we make sure that we create an environment where all the data that the physicians need during the procedure is at their fingertips in the cat lab where they need it. And those are just 3 simple examples of an impact that we can make. And Brian, what you said, like, okay, what is it what you do in the day? Well, here are 3 simple examples of work that we're doing.
I just wanted to highlight one thing that you kind of gave an example of that I was just talking about yesterday. It was interesting, which is sort of the idea of AI. You have AI and people are like, oh no, AI is going to do all the things and take all the jobs. And there's things that maybe it can do really well. And then there's things that like people can do really well that AI has like a really hard time with, like math. So I think there's these places that, like what you described, where you actually get this power of AI doing things that it can do better than what people can do, and people doing the things people can do better, coming together and creating this powerful synergy, which is pretty awesome. We're just talking about it in a much less important way than healthcare. It was about help desk support for tickets, but this idea of there's a person can kind of serve another person better, but that same idea of like 10 or 15 minutes of wrap up work, can AI do a lot of that and turn it into 2 or 3 minutes so that person can get back to serving? I just thought that was an interesting parallel and a cool example, kind of a principle there of like the power of AI and tech coming together with people and them complementing each other versus being a replacement.
Wonderful developments. And to the comments that I think recently there was a strike of nurses in the US, and they were all saying like, hey, don't trust AI, trust the nurse. And is AI replacing our job? AI won't replace their jobs. But the people who know how to use AI, those will replace their jobs. Because AI is going to take away the mundane tasks from them and said that they will still perform the procedure. But AI will make sure they get the right information at hand when they do the procedure. But AI is just in the advisory role. That example that I mentioned where the artery was blocked for 96%, AI gave a recommendation. The physician made the final decision. He said, yeah, I don't like this recommendation that much. I want to use this stent. But it helped him so tremendously already narrowing down the options. If you detect and give them a strategy on what to do there, and then you are still the one deciding. I think we're still quite some years out where AI is truly taking out jobs of people in healthcare. And yes, there might be, in other sectors, there might be jobs indeed that will be more impacted than others. But also those jobs, I think across the world, we have a shortage in labor. So also there, if we can say like, hey, for that help desk person, if that takes away the mundane task of administration and you can truly fix a PC that AI can do, I guess that they choose to fix a PC rather than, filling out the database on what they just did.
Yeah, absolutely.
This actually bridges really well. I'm looking at some of the questions that have come in. I'd like to start with Roy's, which is around the impact of the doctor versus the army of people today that gather data and perform administrative tasks on behalf of the doctor. What are you seeing from the perspective of Philips and as that is developing? We have 2 other ones that actually kind of flow nicely with our story on the right. Go ahead and kind of start there, Patrick.
Yeah, it's a great question, Roy. And indeed, you see an army of people around it there, sitting around a cath lab, and indeed, collecting data here, collecting data there, and it's primarily, of course, where you try to take that away. But still, there, the doctor has to say like, okay, what is what I use here, or how did I do the procedure, or what did I perform there? So even they get something. Another example that we have, we might all have been in situations where you got an exam, you go to the doctor to get the result, and the doctor tells you in medical language what the outcome of that is. Well, also here we have AI that is truly helping the doctor first by looking at the radiology, at the image. So you get a radiology report out there like, hey, we see this here. Can you verify that? So already we create the report for the doctor, and then they can just modify it. Plus, then we translate it from medical language to a language that an 8th grader should understand. And that's truly, Roy, where we help also doctors in reducing their time on it's not just administration, but also interpretation and translation then towards the patient.
That's perfect. All right, our next question is from Bob. I'd like to pull this one up if I can find it. There it is. Thanks for this, Bob. Excellent commentary earlier on synthetic data. How does Philips weigh synthetic data, the finite element of analysis, versus actual human vetted AI technologies?
Yeah, Bob, and correct me if I don't understand this well here, but this is a constant balance that we're looking at, and especially also when I was talking about the regulators. We see now quite some reluctance to invest significantly in synthetic data because we don't know yet, like, okay, what is now accepted to train my algorithm? Because if I train my AI algorithm with data that was created by AI, yeah, well, there could be a lot of bias in there.
Totally.
We have a few reasons why we're looking at synthetic data. One, data is simply becoming unaffordable. Uh, uh, when I joined Philips 3 years ago, we had a project and I needed 15,000 angiograms and then we had to annotate them. But we were able to get it for about $300,000 by having a consortium of hospitals, and they would have some fellows creating that data for us and we would get it. Okay, I saw that the time was way too long to get it and it would not be scalable towards the future. So I asked a commercial party for the same data set. I would have to pay $6.9 million for the same data set. So that means it's unaffordable to have it. So we're looking like, okay, how can I create synthetic data instead of getting all that data? The other reason why we need synthetic data, sometimes it's like, okay, now I need 5,000 images of the left side of the heart chamber. Now I need 5,000 images of the right side of the heart chamber. Now I need 80% stenosis. Now we need 90% stenosis. So the criteria that people are looking for, you can't just go to a hospital and say like, hey, can you have a patient now with 80% stenosis and this disease type? So that's also where working with synthetic data, it will help us getting more of these kind of types in there. Yeah, and then indeed, like, how do you weigh that? Having the synthetic data versus real world data. So yes, we do have people actually also sitting in labs, getting real world data, having soft tissue that they use there to create real world images. And that's also, and that was my last bullet that we get to in the end, the need for partnerships. The need for partnerships, Bob, is huge in this here. Because if you can have true partnerships with hospitals there, because in the end, we all strive for the same thing. The hospital wants to cure people. We want to make sure that we create therapies that can help them curing people. So why not teaming up and doing that together, and with that also make sure that data becomes available.
That's great. We have a bit of a follow-up. It does flow nicely from Anand. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that well. Really, the question is about how you ensure data quality. So kind of given what you just talked about, what are some of the things you guys do to make sure that the data quality is good? And do you feel like there's a need for a human to be in that loop to some degree?
This is huge. It's not just about data quality. When you look at responsible AI, you have to make sure that you're not biased, that you have diversity in your data sets, and then indeed that there's quality. So just look at the data journey. It starts off like, do we have a lawful case to start collecting data? So that's where you need to have legal involved and make sure, like, okay, can I start collecting data for a good cause, yes or no? Then I need data use agreements with the right hospitals to get that done. So let's say you go to UHN in Toronto and say, you're a huge hospital, give me all your data. Well, that's not good because I don't have diverse data. Because that will just give me data of a population in Toronto while I need it across the world. I need data from Asia, I need data from Europe, I need data from all the countries to make sure that I have a cross-section of all the population, because the anatomy of people is different across the world. So all of that comes into making sure that do you have indeed responsible data on getting that in. Then it could be responsible, but then ethics come in. Hey, we got data and maybe this is data from child. Is that okay, yes or no? Or data that came through a secondary course in here. And then indeed you start with data stewards to look at the quality of data. Of course, here we're looking at ways to automate that with AI as well. How can you already see, like, hey, what's happening there, having rules embedded in there. When you're annotating images, you can say, like, hey, this doesn't make sense because you didn't annotate this or this. Hey, you're now annotating this left vein here. That means I also need to see something else. So you're doing a lot of rule-based quality checks in there to make sure that your data is going to be complete and accurate and have that done there. And that, if let's take the iceberg again as an example, the AI is just the tip of the iceberg. And all this data engineering that we're talking about here, that's what you don't see. And that's what typically the executives of the company also don't see. And that's the challenge what you always have if those niche companies that have a great AI algorithm come to your executive and say, look what we have for you. Let me do a demo for you. And within one day, I gear this up for you. Well, you don't have to build that foundation of that iceberg, and you don't have to do the medical validation that we need to do with FDA regulations, et cetera, et cetera. So a huge effort on that one.
Well, it's a great transition to talk about the next topic, which is the associated challenges. And I know when I look at the title of this and see healthcare, the first thing that I think about is regulation. That's got to be tricky. And so we had an audience question that I think teed this up perfectly, which was, how did you think about digital transformation in healthcare, which is regulated, doing it in a safe and quality assured and compliant way, within the accepted risk appetite that you guys have? And I think the question is specifically thinking about like AI and IoT type products, but you can take it wherever you wish.
Yeah. So let's start with that risk appetite part there. I feel that the risk appetite of Philips is low. With that, I mean they're not willing to take a significant risk on that. So they're very risk adverse, which is of course awesome for protecting the patient's data and privacy and so on there. But it leads to a lot of complaints of the clinical scientists, etc. Like, hey, why can't I get access to the data? I need this, and this, and have that going. We do actually have a responsible AI team in my team. That is looking at what do we need to do to make sure that we're safe and secure and do the right things. But what's also interesting is when not when I joined Philips, our newest CEO, Roy Jacobs, I have never ever seen a CEO who talks that much about data and AI. Every speech he has, and earlier this week we released our quarterly earnings, and again the whole speech is about data and AI, and he's also teaming up in the US now, chairing their seat on responsible AI, and what do we sign up for to lead this? Because as I said, we need to shape this. This is trailblazing, because if you don't go fast enough, you're hindering the progress of the innovation of our products. But if you go too fast, you might hinder the privacy and with that get undesired effects. So it's really searching. But again, that's for me that last bullet as well, the need for partnering. You can't do this alone. You need to talk to the regulators. In a month, I'm also talking again to the European Commission to talk with them, to listen to them, to try to understand like how can we jointly create this, focus this, and get this moving.
Well, it's kind of nice. Roy brought in another question that kind of brings in that partnering angle more on the technical side. If you included API integration with many parties and providers in an ecosystem with the end user interactions that are normally part of digital transformation, and how does that land in Philips and in the broader healthcare ecosystem?
Yeah. So we definitely have a lot of data transfers happening, especially also if you look from all the equipment that we have in the field. So let's not mistake that equipment is no longer ours when we sell it. So the data on that equipment is from the hospital, but we have a responsibility to do post monitoring. Does the equipment still do what it's supposed to do? So from that perspective, there are a lot of APIs. Indeed, it's transferring and sending data back and forth. But when we talk about the partnerships as such, no, we're not where we need to be. I think that whole ecosystem, the ecosystem of interoperability, the ecosystem of standards in healthcare. Think about HL7 fire standards that have been created for healthcare. Those are things where we need to get agreements on how do we make this data more accessible for each other. But this is, of course, a very touchy area because you have to work with your competitors to give them your data, and they have to give them your data. Because if you walk into a cat lab, it's an illusion to think that entire cat lab is Philips. No, you see GE, Siemens, Philips, Medtronic, everything is in that cat lab. But a physician says like, hey, it's all medical equipment. I want it to be interoperable. I want it to be sharing that data. And how can you do that? Can you do that with APIs? Can you do that in other ways to get that going? But that's where we still have to step up as an industry to really get closer together. And from a technology perspective, I'm sure that many people will say, hey, the technology is not a problem. The technology is there. We can do that. But it's more about, indeed, the agreements we need to make.
That's really great. I think you started to allude to it, but our last point was to talk about the need for partnering, and love to hear more about what you think about that for you guys as you're trying to bring digital transformation to healthcare.
Yeah. So let's first start with the partnering with the hospitals. So Philips has always been a highly innovative company there. We were always looking like years ahead on what to do there, and we brought innovations to the market, like the simple compact disc that everybody uses. Well, maybe that's revealing my age now, but I assume that most of us have seen a compact disc, but that was Philips. And like many more things there, Philips came up with things. And they invented that themselves, not because someone asked it to do. But we changed our business model. We're really now customer-driven innovation is important to us. So that's where it starts, the partnering with hospitals, the partnering with key opinion leaders. Like, how can we help them making an impact in healthcare? And that's, of course, a great trust and relationship. At the moment when a physician or a hospital says, like, dear Philips, we trust you to partner with us to help us moving forward in the digitalization and curing people. So that's that side on where we say, like, how do we partner with hospitals in building new therapies, building new features in there that we need. But at the other side, as I just mentioned, we need to partner with our colleagues, our competitors in there to make sure that we get interoperable standards and can exchange data way more easy. And then the last part of partnering is what I mentioned, like, once we then consume data, create data, how do we create an ecosystem which is not going to cost us $6.9 million, but where you can say, like, yes, we partner together to get data around. So Philips has a lot of clinical partnerships and public-private partnerships. So the clinical partnerships is really where you then go hand in hand and you say, okay, let's work on this and create something new for that. And that can be done with a single hospital or a consortium of hospitals, while the public-private partnerships, that could be initiated by many different sources there. And it could be a total different industry than only healthcare, but where we have robots that move and so on there. So car industry have robots that move. So it could be that you're in a partnership there to also see, like, hey, how can we partner up doing the same things and making sure that, of course, the patient safety is for us the most important things. Our products need to be reliable. As I mentioned in the introduction, the physician is blind. They are not making a decision and seeing what they're doing. No, they go into the body and they rely on our equipment, and what they see on their screen is through that equipment. So imagine that during the procedure, the equipment fails and they can no longer see what they're doing. So because of that, quality is of utmost importance. And that's where we also need to see, like, hey, should we build that ourselves, or are there significant better parties that can build that for us, and should we partner with them? Especially also now with data and AI, you see many companies out there who can do annotations, who can build synthetic data, who come up with good solutions there, and stop building these things ourselves, but see how you can partner with those to integrate that into the ecosystem of healthcare.
Yeah, I think it's a complicated space and a lot of stuff that probably a lot of us take for granted on a daily basis, but incredible the way that all these things can work together inside of this rich ecosystem. It's pretty neat. I have a ton of questions, but we want to take a moment and invite any of our Chief Architect Network members who may be watching. You should have a link. You can join this. And if you have a question and want to pop in and ask us, this is your opportunity to do so. So open invite, pop in anytime. Grant will keep an eye on that and pull you in if you have a question.
I love that part of the show. We can share the space with our members and have them come on video. And while we're kind of still shifting in this space, I wanted to pull up Lisa's question, which I thought was pretty powerful from an architecture standpoint, as always. She asks, have you defined your principles and patterns aligned to the newly formed responsible AI measurements that are now being linked to IC sustainability and to those standards and metrics? So, I mean, there's a ton happening in this technology space. It's kind of that connection to the longer term vision for, sustainability and purpose and ethics. How is that landing in your space? Where are you seeing that apply today, Patrick?
Yeah, it's ongoing. Actually, this week my team was writing again for Roy, like, hey, what are the recommendations that we want to bring you to the forum there as we define those principles across the industry, and then not just for Philips. It's interesting that Lisa has also talked about sustainability, because sustainability, I'm not sure if you know that, but healthcare is one of the biggest polluters that we have out there. I recently saw a picture where someone was just laying out what they all use during a procedure. Oh my God, it's just amazing. But then also, if you look from an AI perspective and what that all takes, if you start rendering, if you start to 3D constructions, etc., that we're doing, how do we make sure that from a sustainability perspective we're driving in there? Honestly, Lisa, we just formalized the function for responsible AI leadership as of the day after tomorrow, August 1st. So then we truly have a leadership position in that. Then it also will move out of my team and be elevated to indeed get a full seat at the table with the people in there. And I assume then we will also accelerate this significantly in there and working with them. But that's working with Brussels, working with the regulators out there to get the consensus on when do you go too far, when do you not go far enough. I love to get advice from people, especially if you're in that same industry here. Like, hey, what you're doing, and what can we learn from each other? Because as said, if you want to influence a regulator, you better do that together than doing this as Philips, or you doing that as Medtronic, or you doing that as Boston. We should team up and have the same story aligned, and with that, I think we can definitely have success.
Well, that's one of the things I absolutely love about the Chief Architect Network is there's just shy of 300 of us together as Fortune 500 chief architects, and we have those opportunities to learn and share, and we do. Frankly, I've seen some of the best outcomes taking things I've learned from these peers and bringing them into my organizations and saying, why don't we consider this approach? This is where others are seeing success, and also found successes bringing things to the works councils of the world and others based on benchmarking, where we're seeing kind of how the industry is moving. So it's extremely well said. Well, I think we touched so many important areas today, Patrick, which didn't surprise me in the least. I'd be curious, and I don't know how you begin to do it, but what are some of the key takeaways you'd love for people to kind of think about as they step away from our brief conversation today?
One takeaway: don't always reach for the moon. So yes, keep on reaching for the moon and be ambitious, but in the meantime, also see what you can do today. So don't always look at those long-term initiatives like, hey, in 5 years from now, we're going to release this great, awesome thing, because the world needs solutions today as well. So don't get me wrong. I say do a dual. Have a dual strategy on how you get those things done there. The second thing is, we didn't talk about workforce at all right now. Well, that is actually the most important thing that we have there, because this is not just a matter of technology. This is a matter of understanding the technology and understanding the domain that you operate in, and understanding then the ecosystem that you're part of. And those people, you can't just get them out of the air and get them going. So you need to have a good strategy, and we did it in terms of thinking about which capabilities are strategically important for us, and how do we then make sure that we get the right competencies in place to staff those capabilities there. But that's an ongoing thing, because you can't just say like, hey, and now I need these people and get them going. I'm in search right now for computational modelers. Computational modeling is really getting into a scene of hybrid modeling and new technologies coming in there. There aren't that many people out there. If I need a data scientist, I don't just need a data scientist, but I need a data scientist that understands the Premier database or the Optum database that's out there, or the health codes that we have out there. So it's always a combination that you're looking for. So that was my second thing. Think about your workforce and have that strategic plan always ready. Yeah, and third, to keep it there, I would say partner. Don't try to do yourself. Don't be that foolish that you think like, hey, I'm better than what's out there. Get the right partners in and let them help you. Be open to that. And I know it's a challenge, because I'm sometimes afraid to put something on LinkedIn because my phone will go off 20 times in the next hour there, where recruiters will call you or like, hey, I see you're looking for a new person in your team. Can I help you? It's the last thing that you want. But the real partners will, you will figure out who they are, and with that, you can really make an impact.
That was amazing. I have one last thing that I think actually kind of fits well in wrapping up our story here. From Anand, he's asking me his question. Sorry about the connectivity. We'll fix that for next time. But, transparency is a really important part of AI governance, and I believe it's especially true in healthcare. How do you speak to this, and what advice, kind of closing us out, do you have in ensuring transparency with stakeholders and patients?
You see that, rock thing at this point. I think this has also got a lot of comments on the recruiting industry there. Like, hey, I want to understand why this AI engine rejected my application, and etc. So for us, this is part of that responsible AI part. Like, what are the nutrition facts of your AI algorithm? So we truly have to document indeed, like, how does our AI algorithm work, and what we're looking for, and what is the kind of data that we use for that. Now we get to the fact, like I was talking about, the physician doing the procedure and then the administrative burden after. Well, this is how my data scientists now and my AI scientists now look at that. Like, hey, you asked me to build an algorithm, but now you also asked me to do a lot of documentation on how we actually do this kind of things there. But that's what we need to get into. It is regulatory. It will be required. We will have to adhere to these standards as they are. So we see, luckily, more prescriptive on how to do that. So with that, we simply, will be compliant on following those items.
Awesome. Well, this has been a fantastic session, Patrick. I really appreciate you joining us. And it's fascinating. While the healthcare industry is very different than like my own, it's interesting how many overlaps and things there are that are challenges you're dealing with that are the same types of things that we're thinking about. So just neat to see that similarity across all of our industries. We can always learn from each other, no matter what the case. So thank you so much for your time and for joining us. A few things to wrap up. I want to mention that our next live event is going to be taking place on Thursday, August 15th at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. So hope you can join us for that. Second, just want to mention that if you are a chief architect or a major architecture practice leader and you're interested in joining us, you can always go and apply at chiefarchitectnetwork.com. Link is right here at the bottom for you for your convenience. You can read it real quick and head over and apply. We'd love to have you join us. And we appreciate you taking the time out of your afternoon or evening or morning, depending on where you are, to participate today. Thanks for all the great questions. Hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for having me. Have a good one. Bye-bye.